Secretary of State Rex Tillerson with harsh words for North Korea at the United Nations and calling out other countries for supporting the regime. More on that in just a few minutes. Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing. President Trump addressed graduates at the FBI National Academy this morning, and he promised his support to those new agents.
With me as your president, America's police will have a true friend and loyal champion in the White House, more loyal than anyone else can be. The President of the United States has your back 100%.
Kevin Corke is at the White House. What was the thinking, Kevin, behind the president's comments also today about crime and murder rates in Chicago and Baltimore?
Yeah, spot on, by the way, in running that clip, because really that was the main focus. Look, I am with you 100%, despite what you may have heard or maybe even read on Twitter. But first things first, the president did make some pretty strong comments about Chicago and Baltimore. And I think two things, Dana, were at work here. Number one, he wants to draw attention to a circumstance that is clearly at crisis level. And you could certainly make the argument, I think credibly so, that it deserves more federal attention. I think the second element to his making a note to point out Chicago and Baltimore today was to really talk about the youngsters that were there. And I call them youngsters or graduates, maybe not so young in some cases. But the truth is, he wanted to spotlight their potential, their promise, their problem-solving ability, and perhaps most of all, shine a spotlight on the plight of law enforcement in general.
And you look at what's going on in Chicago, what the hell is going on in Chicago? What the hell is happening there? And just north of our nation's capital in Baltimore, on average, someone was murdered nearly every day of this year. Police departments are overstretched, they're underfunded, and they're totally underappreciated, except by me.
Now, as you can well imagine, Dana, there were a number of people who were wondering what the reception might be for the president, given his previous statements about the reputation of the Bureau being in tatters. It was robust. He was certainly cheered throughout, and I think that should tell you a bit more about the nuance, understanding not just what he was having to say about what has happened in their leadership, but also more broadly speaking to his support of the rank and file. Dana?
Well, everyone loves to see the commander-in-chief, that's for sure.
Yep.
Kevin, speaking of the FBI, more comments about the Russia probe and the so-called collusion from the president today. What did he say this morning?
Let me see. I'm going to take you back to the 80s, maybe even 90s, little musical reference here. Talking Heads, you remember that group? Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was. The president, any chance you give him to take the opportunity to talk about this so-called solution, he's going to slam the Russia probe. He did it again today before heading over to Quantico, this time pointing out that there have been millions spent by the special counsel investigating so-called collusion when, as he put it, they know it didn't happen.
I have nothing to do with Russia. Everybody knows it. That was a Democrat hoax. It was an excuse for losing the election, and it should have never been this way, where they spent all these millions of dollars. So now even the Democrats admit there's no collusion. There is no collusion. That's it.
Okay, no collusion proven yet, but I should point out that two people have faced charges, and make that four people are facing charges too, have already taken plea deals. Now, I should also tell you that this weekend the president is expected, Dana, to make his way up the hill, as we like to say, over to Camp David. There he'll get his usual battery of security briefings and maybe even work the phones a bit to try to push that tax reform over the finish line. We'll be watching very carefully from here. Back to you.
I hope he enjoys Camp David. I think it's a fabulous, wonderful place, and a great place for the holidays, too. Kevin,
it
thanks
is, and
very
I
much.
should tell you this real quickly. We're getting flurries here in Washington, Dana,
I see that.
and they're getting them up there as well, so he ought to take advantage.
All right. Thanks so much, Kevin. So we are learning more about edits to the final report from former FBI Director James Comey on the investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server. We already knew the term grossly negligent, which calls for criminal penalties, had been changed to extremely careless. Well, now we know an early version of Comey's report stated it was, quote, reasonably likely that hostile actors gained access to Clinton's emails. The final report changed reasonably likely to possible. Joining us now is Wall Street Journal columnist Kimberly Strassel. She's been following this, and of course, your column is the first thing I read every Friday morning. Is it possible that these changes were made because they didn't have concrete evidence and they wanted to soft pedal it because they weren't going to be able to come up with the goods, or is there something more nefarious behind this?
I think we can't know, but that is precisely why, Dana, that they need to be making Peter Strzok, who is the FBI agent, the one who was in the news this week over his text messages. He is supposedly behind at least some of those edits. Congress has been demanding to interview him for months now. The FBI has withheld him from having to give that interview. They need information, and the only way you're going to know the context for which these changes were made was to get a hold of the people who actually made them, and the FBI has just refused to give the goods on this.
One of the things I believe that you wrote last week is that perhaps the Justice Department needs to identify a person that could be a designated liaison with Capitol Hill on this. Do you think there's going to be any movement on that?
I think the White House has to step in here in one form or another. And it might not necessarily have to be a person that goes there, although that is one possibility. Maybe, White House General Counsel Don McGahn could name an official whose only job and in a temporary capacity is to ensure that the FBI and the Justice Department comply with reasonable congressional demands. The other thing is he could just order them to do so. The president is the chief law enforcement officer in the country.
Take a listen to what Senator Ron Johnson said on Tucker's show last night in regards to this statement by Comey.
This draft statement was done months before they completed the interviews. The FBI, again, this investigation into Clinton's email really was not meant to uncover the truth leading to a prosecution. From my standpoint, it was really meant to cover up the truth and exonerate Hillary Clinton. Again, I have no idea why the FBI just doesn't come clean and provide this information to Congress. What are they trying to hide?
So he's picking up on something that you were saying. And in addition, the Justice Department was explaining this morning how the text messages between Strzok and Page ended up in the hands of some of the reporters, select reporters, before they went to Capitol Hill. So I imagine that there's some frustration from Congress's point of view on that as well.
Well, you know as well as I do from your time in government that usually if something gets given to reporters beforehand, it's because you're trying to influence the way the stories come out. And certainly that first round of stories were very soft on Mr. Strzok, talking a lot about what a great agent he was and not so much into some of the more serious accusations. Look, in addition to not making him available, they continue to stonewall House subpoenas. Senator Johnson has been demanding the unredacted transcripts of several FBI agents who were interviewed about the Hillary Clinton email investigation. They've refused to provide those. So there's a general stonewall going on here that no one should be happy with. We don't want the FBI to hand over, classified information that will undermine our national security, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about their internal actions, and the public has a right to know how these investigations were and are being handled.
Right. Well, Kim Strassel, thank you so much for being on the Daily Briefing. We hope to have you again.
Thanks.
Fox News alert. Fox News has learned Florida Senator Marco Rubio is now expected to vote yes for the Republican tax reform bill. This comes as the full text of the Republican overhaul is set to be released in a little over 3 hours. And despite some last-minute drama, Republican leaders are predicting swift passage.
I feel good about it. I think it'll be out either tonight or tomorrow, and then we'll have a vote probably Tuesday or Wednesday. And look, I think the votes were there last time in the Senate, of course. They'll be there again this time because the bill, if anything, is improved after the House-Senate conference. I think you'll see substantial middle-class tax relief, which is what a lot of people are looking for.
Peter Doocy is live on Capitol Hill. Some last-minute moves happening there, Peter?
And Dana, this is the rare Friday here in the Senate that there are actually senators here doing work. But the ones that are on this conference committee of the House and the Senate that tried to merge a unified tax bill that could pass both chambers stayed so that they could sign on to it. And now that their signatures are on this tax bill out of the conference committee, It's closed. That means that there can be no more changes made to this tax bill. Senator Bill Cassidy said a little while ago he doesn't think leadership would close the text if they didn't have the votes to pass it, and he told us what to look for ahead of this updated tax plan going public in 3.5 hours.
It'll be released to the public, and obviously there's folks who are going to spin it that it's something terrible for the American people, but frankly we're hoping the text speaks for itself.
The highest profile holdout so far, Senator Marco Rubio. The conference committee has been bending over backwards trying to bring him on board, doubling the child tax credit from $1,000 to $2,000. However, only $1,100 of that is refundable, and he doesn't think that's enough. His office says he wants to see text of the bill finally before he commits to vote one way or the other. And this comes as Democrats, who are all expected to vote no on the tax bill, are labeling it a big bailout for the rich.
God bless wealthy people. I'm glad we have them. But they don't need a tax break. It's average middle-class people and people struggling to get to the middle class who need those breaks.
Senator Jeff Flake, Senator Bob Corker, and Senator Mike Lee are all undecided this Friday afternoon, and that endangers the bill, especially when you factor in it's not clear whether or not Senator John McCain will be here for sure to vote either on Tuesday or Wednesday. McCain is being treated at a hospital nearby for side effects from his brain cancer treatment. Dana.
All right, well, we certainly hope that's going well, and all of the senators keeping us interested and on our toes. Thanks so much, Peter. An ingenious financial scheme in the service of ISIS. Prosecutors accusing a woman of funding the Islamic State in a whole new way. Details on the investigation still ahead. Plus, with North Korea tensions escalating, U.S. soldiers are learning unique fighting and survival techniques at a jungle training school to prep for military action. We are live at the UN in just a few minutes.
We have been clear that all options remain on the table in the defense of our nation. But we do not seek, nor do we want, war with North Korea.
Fox News alert: the UN Security Council meeting on North Korea today. As the rogue regime continues to defy the world over its nuclear and missile programs, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson attending the special session and turning up the heat on dictator Kim Jong-un, repeating his vow that the U.S. will use any means necessary to defend itself. Mr. Tillerson also calling out Russia and China for their support of North Korea.
We particularly call on Russia and China to increase pressure, including going beyond full implementation of the UN Security Council resolutions, continuing to allow North Korean laborers to toil in slave-like conditions inside Russia in exchange for wages used to fund nuclear weapons programs, calls into question Russia's dedication as a partner for peace.
Brian Yennis is live at the United Nations. Brian, did North Korea give any indication today that they are willing to speak to the United States?
Good afternoon, Dana. Well, no, it was more of the same from North Korea today at the Security Council, giving no indication at all that they'll be willing to talk to the U.S. or to anyone for that matter to try to resolve this peacefully. Instead, what they did is continue to use provocative language to blame the U.S., saying that they have a nuclear program in North Korea as self-defense.
The U.S. is the one who must be held accountable. There are several nuclear power states over the world now, but there is no country like the U.S. who is continuing to openly threat and blackmail other countries with its nuclear weapons.
Well, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson responded to this statement, this provocation, reiterating that their nuclear program violates international law. Tillerson said all the options are on the table, including military action, but the priority is to pressure and to continue to sanction North Korea to force them to the diplomatic table.
The international community condemns North Korea's pursuit of a nuclear arsenal, and we will never accept a nuclear North Korea. The DPRK's unlawful acts cannot be ignored, nor can they be explained away. They alone are responsible for these tensions. They alone must take responsibility for these tensions, and they alone can solve these tensions.
Tillerson made it clear, though, that the communication lines are open if North Korea is willing to walk through that door. The UN, by the way, UN Secretary General, very, very concerned that any kind of miscalculation or miscommunication can lead to an accidental conflict and escalate to a full-scale war. Dana.
Brian, there was, though, some confusion this week on whether the United States is prepared for itself to talk to North Korea without preconditions. What do you know about that?
Right, that's right. So before this week, the Trump administration has said that they would only speak to North Korea if they agreed that in this negotiations it would end with North Korea getting rid of its nuclear program. Well, on Tuesday, Tillerson said, well, we'll be willing to speak to North Korea with no preconditions. We're ready to speak to them right now. Well, that sort of flew in the face of the White House and his boss. So then today he clarified, saying that North Korea must actually change its act. They must stop with their threatening posture before the U.S. would be willing to sit at the bargaining table with them. So we shall see. Dana.
All right, Brian, thanks so much for being here today. U.S. forces moving from the desert to the jungle.
No!
We have an exclusive look at the new training our military is undergoing. Plus, as details about the final tax plan will be released soon, we have a look at the intense efforts by lobbyists to shape the final language in the bill. New tax plan are about to be released, and Republicans are predicting a warm welcome when major tax cuts finally kick in.
It is going to be a sea change compared to what we've had, and it's going to be a major reduction in taxes. And I think we want to hold on to that, and I think even the Democrats are starting to feel that way.
Jim Tankersley is a tax and economics reporter for the New York Times. Thanks for joining us today. So Senator Marco Rubio yesterday all of a sudden demanded more money in the child tax credit. And let me have you look at this. Grover Norquist said in an article quoted in the Daily Beast, it's worse than a crime. It's a blunder. This is not last minute. This is after the curtain is down. So this is not some kind of clever ploy. It's too weird for words. But, Jim, listen to what Senator Portman said, and then you can tell us how this all went down.
Marco has a passion for being sure that the child tax credit really works for families who are maybe not paying income tax but paying payroll taxes, and that's why he's insistent on the refundability. I respect that. I think he's looking out for the very people we're all trying to help.
Jim, what do you know about how all this went down?
Well, first off, Grover is very quotable, but he's wrong that this was last minute by Senator Rubio. He's been pushing this for years, really, this change, and this behind the scenes and in front of the scenes for a while on Capitol Hill. What's changed in the last 48 hours was he made an actual absolute demand. If they didn't expand the ability of the credit to help low-income people, Senator Rubio said he would vote against the measure. That's not something he'd said before. So after weeks of pushing behind the scenes, winning some concessions, trying on the Senate floor to win an amendment that would have codified these changes, and failing on that, by the way, then Senator Rubio tried this last tactic, and it appears to have gotten him at least a partial victory.
Well, and actually it could end up being that just on the merits, but also politically, Republicans might thank Marco Rubio for pushing for this, because the way he sees it is that this is good for working families, and if the Republicans want to try to hold on to that market, they should do it.
True, and that's definitely the argument that he's been making all along on this. It's also true that, it does not appear that this comes at the expense of the headline corporate tax rate, which is what Grover Norquist and others have been worried about. So there's not, it does not appear to be a pro-growth versus pro-family trade-off that we hear so often about in this deal. You
wrote today, and I know I follow you, so I know that you know the ins and outs of this bill, and you'll get the final report today. But you had a nugget in there in your reporting this morning that I wanted you to expand on, and that is, how hot and heavy has the lobbying been on this bill?
It has been intense. It's been probably more intense than anything we've seen in a really long time in Washington. Something like, several thousand lobbyists are working on it every day or over the last 3 quarters. But I think that the most interesting thing to me in the last few weeks has been, as this moved behind the scenes into the conference committee, it gets very, very hard to actually influence the process. And so the premium got high on just a little bit of FaceTime here and there with lawmakers, or finding innovative ways to pressure pressured them without FaceTime. And so that's what we've seen over the last couple of weeks is lobbying groups, businesses, the very high-paid, very high-powered lobbyists of D.C. finding new avenues to get to their representative and try to get that one very lucrative change to go their way in the bill.
Jim, I bet that you're glad that you were looking at the possibility of this being the last weekend, or maybe next weekend being the last weekend that you have to work on the tax reform bill.
I think we all are.
I imagine so. Thanks for being here today, Jim Tankersley.
Thanks for having me.
So a growing list of Democrats calling for the president to resign, but might that backfire on them? I'll ask Chris Starwalt. Plus, this is a scary story. An American woman is indicted on charges that she laundered money to help ISIS using Bitcoin. Went on President Trump to step down after more than a dozen women have accused him of sexual misconduct. A total of 9 senators now have called for Trump's resignation. One of them, Pennsylvania Senator Bob Casey, now facing some backlash back home for his stance against the president. Let's bring in Chris Starwalt, Fox News politics editor and the editor of Halftime Report. Can I throw a little tweet at you?
Hit me.
All right. So we know that Bob Casey, the senator from Pennsylvania, had called on President Trump to resign. Now, Lou Barletta, who is from Pennsylvania, he says Senator Casey should spend more time fighting for Pennsylvania's workers, securing our borders, giving working class families a tax break, and fixing our health care system that's hurting our seniors instead of trying to undo the election that Donald Trump won. The American people are tired of people playing politics. Who do you think wins in this messaging war?
Let's see. I don't know who wins. I know that the American people lose. Look, I take as seriously Lou Barletta, a Republican, and the Trumpiest Trump Republican, one of the most. His criticisms for Bob Casey are as meaningless as Bob Casey's criticisms of the president.
Okay.
Of course, Bob Casey wants Donald Trump to resign. If it wasn't for the allegations of misconduct and this misbehavior towards women, it would be over Russia or it would be over something. Of course, Democratic senators say that the president should resign. That's sort of their jam. That's where they're at. And of course, Lou Barletta, for his district and his future political aspirations, wants to say that he is against this guy and he's up to no good. So this is the unvirtuous cycle of American political blather.
Well, it's clear that the Democrats have decided that this is what they're going to focus on. I mean, if you have 9 senators now, it'll probably be up to 12 by the end of the year, I would imagine. When might we know if this is actually having an impact with at least the Democrats and their base?
Look, the allegations against President Trump, as they occurred, did serious harm to his chances to get elected. Fortunately for him, the storm passed and Hillary Clinton stumbled or was and also pushed. James Comey helped. She had a very bad closing weeks of the campaign, and Donald Trump won. It was the most shocking political upset of my lifetime, and that amazing thing happened. That covers a lot of the sins. If you win, if you've been accused and then you win, then you can, if Roy Moore would have won in Alabama, he would have said, okay, the people of Alabama knew about the charges and allegations against me, and I won anyway, so go pound salt. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump can say that to a certain degree. The question of whether or not this will be effective against Trump, are there new credible accusations that relate to his past, and do they come out now? If they don't, I don't see how this much changes anything.
It'll fizzle out. Let me ask you, though, there was news today. I think we've all been sort of waiting and expecting that this might happen to a woman being accused of sexual harassment. Andrea Ramsey was going to run for Congress. She has now pulled out. She's a Democrat, and she says, in its rush to claim the high ground in our royally national conversation about harassment, the Democratic Party has implemented a zero-tolerance standard. We are in a national moment where rough justice stands in place of careful analysis, nuance, and due process. I thought this was pretty interesting that she actually was the first one, and she has to withdraw from the race.
Dag on. Well, rough justice indeed. Obviously men, whatever amount of sexual harassment to which men are subject, men are much less likely to claim it, but much less likely to talk about it because it seems like they're weak and so they're not going to talk about it. So I would expect that instances of sexual harassment towards men are rarer, and I would say that men are much less likely to report it than women because of machismo stuff. But I think that I think we are now reaching out into sort of the ether on this movement as it relates to politics. And you are starting to hear people, not just in politics, but in culture too, push back. You saw Tavis Smiley and others pushing back very hard against accusations and hard against these claims. So now we're starting to see people try to dig in and survive after so many have been swept aside so quickly.
All right. I see that it's snowing there in Washington, D.C. You happy about that?
I'm very happy about it, and it's quite lovely, and Washington always looks better in the snow.
All right. Chris Direwalt, thanks so much.
You bet.
So combat in the jungle, a new technique U.S. soldiers are learning in Hawaii. The Pentagon is not taking any chances when it comes to North Korea as it becomes more of a threat. The Army is teaching servicemen and women how to fight and survive in rainforests similar to those found in Asia. Jonathan Hunt is live at the training facility in Hawaii. Jonathan.
Hi, Dana. I can now personally attest that jungle training is tough. It is grueling, but it may just save American lives and could help the U.S. win the next war. As dawn broke, we boarded a Black Hawk helicopter for a spectacular journey across the roof of the rainforest before being dropped in. Joining soldiers who have fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, learning to fight a very different kind of war.
The goal is to be able to teach the skills that students can survive, fight, win in jungle environment.
As every Vietnam vet knows, the jungle itself is not an easy enemy to conquer, and the only way to do it is on foot. The loud rumble of armored Humvees is perhaps the most familiar sound from the desert and urban wars the U.S. has been fighting. Here it is the sound of soldiers moving in almost total silence, save for the soft thud of their boots on the ground.
It's so restrictive. It's just everything's so tight. You can, in Iraq and Afghanistan, I can move 5-6 kilometers in an hour while I'm dismounted. Here, I may be moving 500 meters.
These soldiers spend 3 weeks living and fighting in the jungle. Every minute designed to give them the real-world experience of potential future wars. All part of preparing for whatever's next.
That's our job, is to be ready to fight the next fight.
And to emphasize how intense the training is here at the 25th Infantry Division's Lightning Academy, 75 battle-hardened soldiers began this course 3 weeks ago, Dana. Today, in just about 20 minutes behind me, just 33 of those will graduate. Dana?
Jonathan, I'm curious, did you talk to anybody who might have been deployed in Iraq as a fight against ISIS, who now is training in the jungle, and how different that must be?
Yeah, we talked to a lot of these soldiers who have done many tours in both Iraq and Afghanistan, and they all said these are a completely different set of skills you need to fight any jungle-based campaign. So they are all very grateful for this. They won't talk about policy, they won't name the most imminent threat to America, but they all know what could be coming, and they want to have the skills that will be needed in any future fight. Dana.
Well, that was a fascinating report. Thanks so much for bringing it to us today.
Sure.
All right.
Thank you.
So there's this Long Island woman. She's under arrest for sending money to ISIS, and federal investigators say Zubia Shainaz, I hope I said that right, did it through online currencies, and she's now facing federal charges. Julia Banderas joins me now. So what exactly did this woman allegedly do?
She left behind basically a digital trail. And you would think by now would-be terrorists would learn their lessons. A trail of terror, basically, to what they say was her devious plot. Here's her plan. Launder more than $150,000 to ISIS. Not smart. Using the online currency Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, which are traceable. According to the feds, 27-year-old Zubia Shainaz is charged with wiring the money to, quote, various individuals and front companies in countries such as Pakistan, China, and Turkey. She even wired the funds between March and August of 2017. Now, the Brentwood woman then allegedly planned to join the terror organization after traveling to Syria, but not before, get this, quitting her day job in June, where she worked as a lab assistant at a Manhattan hospital, of all places, making $71,000 a year. Shocked neighbors learned of the investigation months ago. Listen.
Undercover policemen, yes.
Every day.
They identified themselves to us, and we were aware of them for the last 3 months or more.
Now, the U.S. citizen born in Pakistan tells a much different story. Her attorney says investigators have it all wrong and admits his client was trying to help people, but it wasn't terrorists she wanted to help out.
She was involved in assisting refugees. She worked at a hospital in some war-torn areas, and what she saw made her devoted to lessening the suffering of a lot of the Syrian refugees.
Well, Shanaz, who has no criminal history known as of yet, pled not guilty to charges of bank fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and 3 counts of money laundering. She faces up to 90 years in prison if she's convicted.
Okay, I have a question, though. So Bitcoin, Deirdre Bolton was here last week trying to explain it all to me.
It's confusing.
It is confusing.
Yeah.
But as I understand it, like, even people like Kim Jong-un use Bitcoin to try to cover up their activities. But you say it is traceable.
It is if somebody were to be able to go in there and hack into it. Everything is hackable as far as I'm concerned. The feds are able to hack into these things. Bitcoin is basically an online currency where instead of using a bank where a bank is going to trace your funds, you take that money, you put it into your own private account, and you are in control of it, nobody else. But, of course, with every website, it is hackable. I mean, if you have the right resources, you know, but as far as this woman, you know, this lawyer now has to prove that she, in fact, was trying to help out refugees after she Googled ISIS. How to join ISIS was among her Google internet research.
Well, I'm glad that they caught her, and hopefully this is a deterrent for other people.
I would hope so.
All right, thank you, Julie. Appreciate it. So TGIF, it's almost Saturday. You know, I love to catch up on some weekend reading. So here are my picks from the weekend reading folder. Wired looks at the terror industrial complex, tracing the weapons supply chain for ISIS back to the United States. And then in the Texas Tribune, the latest in a series on the federal government abusing its power to seize property for a fence along the southern border. And in Britain's Telegraph, psychologists warn the compulsive need to post selfies has become a genuine mental disorder. You can bet I'm going to read that. For my full list of articles, follow the Daily Briefing on Instagram @DailyBriefingFNC and check out our Instagram story. So one of President Trump's judicial nominees struggling with some basic questions. Watch this.
Have you ever tried a jury trial?
I have not.
Civil?
No.
Criminal?
No.
Bench?
No.
State or federal court?
I have not.
Should Federal Elections Commissioner Matthew Peterson get the job? Plus, the decision to repeal net neutrality rules. How will that change the internet?
The legend of a cable company trying to break the internet may make a scary bedtime story for children of telecom geeks, but it isn't reality.
The Federal Communications Commission rolling back net neutrality regulations put in place by the Obama administration, sparking lots of protests that the internet will never be the same. Let's bring in our panel. Chris Freites is the founder of Storyline and host of Politics Insight out on Sirius XM. And Jamie Weinstein is host of the Jamie Weinstein Show podcast for National Review Online and the founding partner of JMW Strategies. Thanks for being on the show, you guys. So net neutrality, is it the end of the world as we know it, Jamie?
Well, you know, there's a lot of problems with our debate these days on a lot of different issues, but I think one of the problems the left has is that everything is framed in apocalyptic terms. If you pass traditional Republican tax cuts, the world is going to end. And the same thing with net neutrality. Basically, this has only been in place 2 years, but by now ending it, supposedly the world is going to end here. I saw online that people are arguing that suicide rates are going to go up. You're going to have to go in to the airport to buy your tickets. You're not going to be able to buy them online. I think there's probably good and bad arguments, and I've seen them for net neutrality, having it and not. But the arguments that are being framed around this debate on the left seem way out of proportion. I don't think you'll see any of those things. If you started having to buy your tickets at the store and not online anymore, airline tickets, people would be up in arms and they would change this law within seconds. So I think that our debate has to become within rational terms, and that's not what we're seeing right now.
Well, Chris, it certainly hasn't been rational. The right would say, well, look, the free market is a good thing. Competition is better. Maybe consumers will actually benefit from this. And the left really does they actually truly believe that net neutrality is the most important issue. What do you think?
Well, I think when you take a look at this, the Obama administration was making the case that you need to
regulate the internet like a utility, and that if you don't do that, you create fast lanes, you let some companies pay more for quicker service or quicker downloads. That might hurt small businesses. That might hurt people who can't afford to play. Now, the Trump administration has said, that's nonsense, that we got to let the market take care of this. And when you take a look at some of the arguments the ISPs make, they say, look, if T-Mobile wants to offer you Netflix, unlimited Netflix, for instance, the Obama administration FCC was going to say, well, that violates net neutrality. Right. And we don't think that market kind of correction should happen. We think the market should be able to offer anything that they want and not get throttled. So that's what we're seeing. But Dana, I also want to make the point that the reason this is going back and forth, we saw the Obama administration say we need to regulate the internet like a public utility. Then you saw the Trump administration say nonsense, and that's largely because, look, Congress hasn't touched telecommunications policy since 1996. The last time they took a look at this, the law had 2 references
Chris,
to
I have
the
to
internet.
say I'm embarrassed that in 1996 I actually worked on the telecommunications bill of 1996 with Chairman Bliley was the chairman back in the day there. All right, Chris Freites and Jamie Weinstein, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Wildfires burning out in California for nearly 2 weeks now and claiming the life of one firefighter. Will the hot, dry weather cooperate as crews struggle to contain the flames? That's next. Even though Black Friday is long gone, new holiday shoppers can still score some great deals. Today is free shipping day. Nearly 1,000 stores are delivering gifts at no charge with no minimum purchase. The package is guaranteed to get there by Christmas. For a list of participating retailers, visit freeshippingday.com. I'm going to do that. So cold temperatures and snow showers across the Great Lakes and Northeast, while out west, firefighters struggle to contain wildfires. Fueled by high winds and dry weather, the fires now claiming the life of a first responder and torching some 700 homes. Chief Meteorologist Rick Reichmuth in the Weather Center now. So will those firefighters out west get any relief soon?
Yeah, unfortunately, things are not looking good across the west. Things continue to be dry, obviously, to have the fires and the wind. And we also don't have any precipitation coming in. Critical fire danger across parts of the south. Red flag warnings here. That just means extremely dry conditions across central California as well. Winds right now, not that bad, but they will pick up this afternoon and this weekend increase again. So we're going to be watching likely, even though this time the strongest of the winds a little bit farther towards the north. Remember all those fires we had a couple months ago up around the Santa Rosa area. Critical fire danger there on Saturday, as well as down just to the north around Ventura County in towards Southern California. As far as precipitation goes, we eventually, around 6 days from now, get some precipitation into Northern California. Southern California, you get the idea. There's just a dry slot here. No precipitation coming in at all. And you just mentioned it, Dana. Across the east, it's been very, very chilly. And we have some more snow developing here across parts of Pennsylvania, upstate New York. We'll see a little bit of snow throughout the afternoon towards the evening. Once this is out of here tonight in towards tomorrow, that's a snow, go towards tonight into tomorrow. The winds will kick up again across the lakes, more lake effect snow, and a chilly day again for Saturday. Here's the next few days. Saturday, another cool one. Sunday, another cool one. But take a look by Monday. Temps begin to moderate a little bit. We'll be back up towards 45 in Chicago, 43 in New York, 48 in Philly. So some warmer air coming in, at least finally, by next week. Dana?
It sounds like your throat is dry too, Rick.
I have lost my voice yesterday. Not sounding good. Sorry.
Well, we hope you feel better soon. All right. Thanks, Rick. All right. So a lot of cash bringing a lot of cheer in one community. We'll tell you where police officers are giving folks a very pleasant surprise.
I think it's a great cause, and it gets us out there, more so than we already are.
A cringe-worthy moment on Capitol Hill yesterday as one of the president's judicial picks was questioned by the Senate Judiciary Committee, but did not seem to have many answers. Senator John Kennedy was questioning Matthew Spencer Peterson. Watch.
Mr. Peterson, have you ever tried a jury trial?
I have not.
Civil?
No.
Criminal?
No.
Can you tell me what the Dober standard is?
Senator Kennedy, I don't have that readily at my disposal.
Just for the record, do you know what a motion in limine is?
I would probably not be able to give you a good definition right here at the table.
Do you know what the younger abstention doctrine is?
I've heard of it, but again.
How about the Pullman abstention doctrine?
I heard.
You'll all see that a lot in federal court. Okay.
Well, video of that exchange has since gone viral, being shared tens of thousands of times. A little uncomfortable there. So imagine getting stopped by a police officer and surprise, instead of a ticket, you're handed $100. And the good news is that's exactly what happened in Shawnee, Kansas. An anonymous donor gave the police department $10,000 to hand out. That person has been donating that amount of cash every holiday season for the last 3 years, which is a really nice way to get pulled over. I haven't driven in 9 years because I've moved to New York, but if I ever do get pulled over, I hope I get money and not a ticket. Thanks for joining us on the Daily Briefing. It's been a really great week, and I'll be here next week. I'm Dana Perino. Here now, Chef.